live. Welcome, everybody. Randall, Neil, how's everybody doing?
Good,
Awesome.
thanks.
All right, episode 8. There we go. Today we chose a topic that's called "What's New and What's Next in Work from Home." No doubt, everybody on the planet has heard about the new future of work: work from anywhere, work from home, work from literally your boat, your car. It's working from anywhere, anyhow, anytime. So we're not going to talk too much about what all that, what it's about. There's tons of reports we can direct you to if you want to learn more about that. We're going to talk about the impact to MSPs and how they could maybe want to gear up to kind of help their customers, solve this big nut. Um, the future of work has arrived. Now what? Right? Here we
I
are.
really, I really see it as a phase one, phase two type of approach. Uh, Probably almost every MSP has reached that phase one of allowing their customers to work from home. But what's the next thing? What are they missing in the puzzle? You give them the basics, but then you got to have some building blocks, and then you can build solutions on top of that. I think that's where we want to discuss today is what are the next steps, apart from the basic firewall, VPN, access to some files, or maybe moving things to SharePoint or some other cloud platform. What's the next big thing that we need to work on if we're going to properly do this
Yeah.
long term?
And I think beyond that, it then is the human implication, because process systems and tools are used by people. And what does it mean for those people? How do we manage those people remotely? Do we trust our staff to do what we expect them to do? Or do we feel we have to police them? And are there negative effects to the home worker without that separation between work and home and that lack of creativity? And I know we're going to talk about some technology changes which may improve that interaction. But yes, a very interesting topic.
I don't know if most people know how the traditional work all got started, right? But in general, this is something that actually the military did after World War II, right? It was a 9 to 5 gig, had a rigid infrastructure, right? You had to produce and you had a 40-hour week, sometimes more. But basically, it's a structure that was built upon primarily manufacturing where you had to get into a certain punch in the clock and
The
punch every.
factory.
Yeah. And of course, I don't know about you, but I don't know most people that I know are not in the factory business anymore, in the information technology gig. But, COVID has simply blown that up. And maybe it should have blown this up years ago, right? But if you talk to lots of companies out there, that a lot of them have actually been working remotely for decades, right? They've been playing with this concept before, right?
As you
Um,
know, I lived in Mexico for 5 years, so working from home was not quite unknown to me.
there you go. Not just working from home, but from a different country now, right? So we've got that, stage. Let's talk about the MSP. Let's talk about the MSP and how they should approach their customers now. So setting this up, you've got the MSPs out there, you've got their customers doing all sorts of remote stuff, right? What do you think the role of the MSP should be moving forward?
I believe that as an MSP, you have to discuss this topic if it hasn't been discussed already. And like I said, there's that phase one, phase two approach. So maybe you've already allowed the clients to work from home, but what are the needs that come after it? Probably the low hanging fruit are security. Maybe getting an MDR platform or really making sure that there's the zero trust is a great thing to go start to investigate because having devices, especially you don't know what devices is at home and what the kids are doing on that device if they're not using an authorized computer, uh, and you're giving them that computer trust on your network. That could be another thing to look into. Those two things are probably the lowest hanging fruit. But I think also helping the clients or the owners, the business owners, the stakeholders of the company understand that this is not just a shift about where they're working from. It's a whole shift about how work is performed. The whole reason we have traffic jams is because that, like you said, that factory mentality, the 9 to 5. Everybody's rushing to get to their workplace for 9 a.m. and to finish by 5 p.m. Or some do a little time shifting some go in at 6 a.m. to beat traffic and leave much earlier. But now this kind of shows us how how kind of ridiculous that whole thing is now that we can actually do. Some people work better at night. Some people work better early in the morning. Some people might wake up at 4 a.m. and do all their work before noon and then just do something else and probably go to sleep at 3 p.m. But that's another thing. You know, it's a whole change of a mentality. And I think that's important to have that discussion.
I think, I mean, as always, I always find in these math chats that I'm, agreeing with Randall, which I suppose we should be, because we're all kind of like singing from the same hymn sheet. But I think it's firstly what Julian said is acceleration of change. People have been working at home for over a decade, maybe longer. The question has been now, rather than it being something which is unusual to do, more and more when you're looking to recruit new people, it's kind of an expectation that they're looking for a package which does give them a split between working in the office and working at home. So I think as an MSP, making sure that we provide, I guess there's 2 layers of advice. Randall's already pointed out what I think is the number one priority, is making sure that you implement that infrastructure in a secure way with appropriate tools and security. But then it's also about this opportunity for an MSP to look for maybe some of those more niche products, which are like performance management tools or tools which improve the employee experience. Because again, one of the things which is not uncommon, and again, I always, as you may spot in the math chats, always end up going into that sales space. Salespeople's burn out. Salespeople will churn quite heavily within most organizations. So we've got to look at ways that we're going to reduce that churn, not increase it, when we move them into this remote working scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that when you look at the bigger picture of working from anywhere, it's not just a topic obviously affecting MSPs. It's a topic affecting almost every business, right? And, implementing technologies to help these end customers, these businesses, to manage all these things is probably, obviously where we want to head, right? So you've got, the actual employees, they're looking for some kind of a predictability to flexibility, right? They want to be able to be flexible, but in a predictable way. They want to have a kind of an evolution of benefits, right? It's like the old benefits was like this. Now the new benefits are like this. Like I'll take a hit here, here, and here if I get this, this, and this. So it's that kind of a different HR approach. You've got completely different approaches to hiring and retaining, employees today. If you can find people who want to be hired properly and who want to be retained, right? You have to change up your whole strategy. So there's a whole HR discussion to discuss around there. Then you've got all the legal issues they've got to pile on there. And so just look at HR and then that way you're hiring people. Let's talk for that for a moment. How is that going to impact the businesses as well as the technologies that we can implement to help them get that right?
Well, if I go fast and think about it from the human level, what I suspect we'll see is that to get the best candidates, we're going to have to offer them that flexibility. We're not going to be able to get the best people and go, hey, we want you to be in the office 50, 60 hours per week like you would have done in the 80s. They're just not going to do it. So I think when it comes to recruitment, that flexibility in maybe the application process will also come in. So we'll do like 3 days of different assessment centres that come through. We can do a lot more of that remote. We can do that a lot more clever with a bit of technology. But it's that expectation of what is the package that they're going to receive. And I think that is going to take a bit of a change because normally it'd always be, in the sales department, the biggest load would be base salary plus the commission plus any other incentives you may be entitled to. But I think now a company which goes along and says we've got a great basic salary, excellent commission, good benefit package, which includes 2.5 days per week working from home, they've got you rather than the company has the same benefits but says, oh, but we want you to be in the office because it suits us. And I think for me, that's the big change is that a lot of time, especially in HR, they will tell you about being employee-centered. And we all know that is 60, 70% true. The other 30% being making sure no one can sue me if I need to manage that person out of the business. But now we really do need to be employee-centered. So if we want the best people, how do we attract them? And that kind of so if you've done that great job, which Randall talked about getting the right infrastructure to support them, the question which I kind of like pose, I throw it back to you guys actually for maybe to answer, if not now, maybe in a little bit of time, is how do we value those employees? Because there are lots of clever solutions out there which do really nice things like take a picture for your webcam every 30 seconds to make sure you don't leave your desktop. Now, I, for one, if I worked for a company which did that, the first thing I do is put sticky tape over my webcam. I don't want to be the prisoner in my own house because I can't have too many toilet breaks during the day. So it's interesting, this change in perspective where it's not just the technology which changes, but it's going to be the entire approach to how we value, monitor, incentivize our employees.
I think that what I found completely interesting is that people started to be woken up to the idea of how much time they're wasting commuting, and actually going, wait, why am I wasting like an hour in the morning, an hour at night? It's 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. That's 10 hours. Why am I not getting paid that 10 hours of commute? And it's which shows the value of working from home. But of course, face to face, nothing beats face to face. I mean, if we were to go for a pint, it's one thing to do it on Zoom. Yes, we'll still have a good time. But I mean, if we were all to meet up at a pub, whole different experience. And it's the same thing with business meetings. Not that we're going to drink beer at a business meeting, although that could be a perk. But what I'm saying is that sometimes, like Neil said, you could have an arrangement where 2 days a week you meet at the office, and those are the days that you have a lot of those back-to-back meetings, and then you go home and you do the real work uninterrupted by people trying to chat about what happened on whatever hot show there is going on Netflix or on TV. And there is a lot of wasted time at the office, more than I think the business owners believe. And sometimes you can actually be more efficient in a half-hour Pomodoro Technique type session than a whole half day in the office with your employees talking about secession or something.
Yeah. And that's where I have an interest, because I can remember a situation. When was it? It was probably the early 90s when we started that first wave of tech. And I went from having to drive around and pay phones and put coins in to phone people to add a mobile phone. And then to improve things, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have one of these, but at one stage, I then had a fax machine in the boot of the car so I could receive faxes when I was out and about. And it's kind of like, so one of the things which I'm intrigued about is that technology was always, when it was launched, was about how it's going to free up our time. And yet most of us know we've all ended up working faster. And the interesting thing for me is, how do we look after those employees when they're working from home? Because what we're saying at one hand is great. We can be more efficient. We can be more productive with that time. But do I still want them to be sat in front of that computer screen working for 7.5 hours? Or do we need to move to smarter tools, smarter methodologies, so we can say, actually, what I've got is a clear output that I look for from you, a quality standard which we're all working to. But if you deliver that and you finish an hour early every day, we don't care. Mm-hmm. Controversial, but it's like, if we're going to change the way in which the world of work works, we've got to change it.
And at the end of the day, it's going to bring the same results. You're going to get the work done. But the difference is you're going to have a happy employee rather than one that's stuck there for an extra hour going, okay, what am I going to do for an hour? The work is done. I'm just going to, twiddle my thumbs.
It's also, there's some technologies that you can overlay and you can install agents in everybody's computers, and it monitors your time on the apps and monitors how much you're in email, monitors, what websites you visit, how much you're on various social medias and so on. But then you look at it and go, is that really the way to go? Right. I mean, maybe for certain, industries, maybe. Right. And I'm not saying that you might not want to do this. For example, if you're an employer, you may want to implement that if you feel you're not getting the productivity out of the people, out of your staff. So let's find out what's going on. Right. So maybe that's more of a review process, if something goes wrong. But as policing the humans, the people that's working for you may not be such a wise idea. But there are some instances, though, that is necessary.
Yeah, exactly.
Security, for example.
You can use those tools to find out how you can help your employees be more productive, but you don't want to implement it in a way that you're distrusting all your employees, because that's the vibe you're giving them. And the vibe you're going to get back is, I'm going to do as little as possible to get paid as much as possible.
I just have to share a story. When I was early in my sales career, and we were just monitored, one of our key KPIs was that on a day we had to spend a minimum of 4 hours on the phone talking to customers every single day. 4 hours. That's a lot of talking for any man. I don't care who they are, even me. And but what we discovered was that we could phone a large company and just ping around their entire network. You know, the press 1 for, press 2 for, press 3 for. Just keep clicking the buttons, then go repeat menu, repeat menu. So if my experience is if you become too draconian with it, then you get they feel the disrespect and they'll play the game. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the combination is, yes, you can use it, you can set the benchmark, but I think if you're talking about how do we maximize the output from our people, then my perspective, is only my perspective, is trust first. And then when they break that trust, or an individual breaks the trust, then you're perfectly legitimate to go in and say, we're going to make sure we're monitoring. But apart from that, yeah, a healthy baseline of data is always useful. So you can just say, I've got a team of 25 people, and I know on average, with some variance, they're all doing roughly the same. Perfect. But it's when I hear about these extremes where it's kind of like, you know, webcam every 30 seconds taking a picture, it's kind of like, okay, so I've taken, you know, we all hated the cubicle life. And now what we're doing is we're going to say, we want you to be at home in your little virtual cubicle because we don't trust you. And that's the thing which can be the problem.
I mean, obviously, those types of things should be targeted. If you feel you have a problem with certain employees, by all means. The only time that I would sort of say this kind of makes sense is on the security level, right? If there are certain things that you don't want your staff to be doing remotely from a security breach perspective, right? Risk perspective, you might want to do some things to prevent certain things from happening. And that's, I think, part of the security program that you want to implement. So I would say that for HR, make sure you have a different hiring process. And by the way, there's lots of tools out there, technologies that they can implement. But before we hash this one to that, is there anything else you want to add about HR and people as well, Randall?
Well, you know what I found interesting is that, you know, we're technology people. We're geeks in the better sense of the word. Now we went from talking about technology to talking about business processes and almost business philosophy in a way. And it's showing the kind of evolution that is happening in the MSP space. We are going from technology vendors to almost business partners. We have to educate the companies, not only the technology, but on how to work in a new, you know, ecosystem of work from home. It goes beyond the technology. We're dealing now with humans. We're dealing with feelings. We're dealing with depression. We're dealing with anxiety, and business owners have to be taught. So we have to know this. We have to get educated ourselves about what are the changes that are happening within our communities, within our clients, to be able to help educate the business owners or the stakeholders on how to evolve just as quickly as the world is evolving, not just because of technology, but because of new realities. And I think it's a really fascinating to see how we don't just sell technology now. We have to be business partners. We have to give business advice, which is really a new thing for a lot of us.
Honestly, I would end up like round my bit off by saying is from a HR perspective, making sure they have got all the kind of extended right policy. So one which came there was risk, and we're talking about cyber risk, but also risk assessment for the individual. So I can only talk from the perspective, you know, tell me if it's different down in where you guys are based in Canada, in the States, etc. But in the UK, if I'm working at my workstation at home for my employer, then the employer is a duty of care to make sure that I've got the right desk, the right monitor, the right equipment. And if I've got none of those things and I suffer an industrial injury, then I'm going to sue you. So don't forget to do the security and have just a blank policy, but actually say, oh, have you got an adequate workstation? Create a form, send the form electronic, get it repeated, make sure you order it every quarter. There's so many other things which you may not be straight away obvious by saying let's work from home. But you know, if you've got somebody at home and they're back working for you at home, then they can sue you. And if they have an injury and you think, oh, I want to get them out the door, you won't be able to because they'll sue you for that as well.
More technology opportunities. And by the way, if there is a way for anyone to sue anyone, it's going to be happening right here in America. So suing is a pastime. It's a national pastime. But, you know, another issue of that before we jump on is legal issues, right? You've really got to make sure that you have really good legal advice now, because contracts are written up differently and hiring and firing is a little bit differently now. And you have all the other things like source deductions and payments, and because if someone's on contract, you know, and they're outside of your area, different state, different country, different province. Many things are affected. So if you're going to be doing something, you want to have your accounting system, your ERP system, whatever that is sort of baked out to help manage complexities of where your people are working from. And also you get the other issue as well, and I'll just drop this one and then move on, is that as people work from home, governments allow certain claims, right? Tax claims that you can make because you're working from home. So you can claim part of your insurance and your heat and all these things as well, right? So this is another tax benefit, by the way, that people working from home gets. And as an employee or employer, you've got to make sure you've got all that stuff squared away because of different tax forms and stuff. So you're getting to tools and platforms and ERP and payroll accounting management platforms that's going to have to manage a wider variety of activities. And you do have to get all your paperwork right, because it's not just like, hey, I'm working from home so I can start making claims. There are some paper forms you got to, sign up and so on. So all these things become advice that I think MSPs, the opportunity here is MSPs can really bubble up to the surface by saying, hey, do you know about this? How can we help you here? Maybe you need a better, platform for your ERP. Maybe you need a better accounting system, a better this, better that. Just talking off the cuff, but generally, this is a great time for MSPs to be talking about the technologies that could help companies manage a remote workforce, right? So let's jump into the other areas. Let's talk about data management, which is another, that's a monster topic, right? For working from anywhere. Everybody's got these computers everywhere. They're saving stuff to their computers everywhere. And you've got the company with their repository somewhere in the cloud, right? What is that conversation looking like now for an MSP with end customers around data management?
Well, I think it's important that, for example, quite a few companies were launched into SharePoint or some other like feature or solution that is cloud-based, so that people don't have to necessarily have a VPN to keep working. And setting up a SharePoint site is quite easy. I mean, it takes me less than an hour to set everything up on Office 365, get a SharePoint site, doing a little bit of a management for the users. But it's when it gets to those sensitive, confidential documents and taking advantage of the bells and whistles that these platforms come with tagging something as confidential, tagging something as highly classified that could not leave the office, or those are things that we need to do next. So there's again, phase one, phase two. So phase one is maybe going to the cloud, but phase two is hardening up the security once those documents are out there, because next thing you know, you have a kid that can jump onto the computer while you're taking your bathroom break, and next thing you know, they're playing around and they're moving files and deleting stuff. Who knows? So you never know what could happen, and it's going a little bit, doing a deep dive into the tools to really enhance the experience and enhance the security is, to me, the next logical step.
Yeah. And document management as well. That's another thing you brought up, right? It's great. You need to have a document management solution there, right? And now e-signatures, because not just you're working from home, but all your customers are working from everywhere. So you got to get that e-signature in there. So you've got to be able to take your contracts, right, and compile them in a central location. Then you've got to get your SLAs out to your customers, and you got to get them to execute it. And you got to have your sales team to review it, that type of thing. There's a lot of things going to be happening with document management as we move forward, right?
I think as well, it is a potentially very lucrative space to be in as an MSP, because there are solutions available at every price point, from relatively inexpensive cloud-based solutions to someone like Global Sign with a physical appliance that's somewhere within a government department. Everything in between is available. So I think what came to mind when he was speaking, Julie, is it's kind of like there's I think to each of those points we want to look at, there's two sides. So the one is, how do we get the best technology in place so that we offer security, so that we can trust the connection, etc., and balanced against the freedom which we want the end user to have, because we want them to have that flexibility, be able to get what they want, use it how they need to use it, without being overtly worried. But let's face it, You can't name a country on the planet where someone's, well, normally it's a government minister, has taken some form of laptop on a train and jumped off, and the train's gone sailing off down the road full of government certified secrets. So let's just hope those drives are always encrypted.
For sure. I mean, security definitely is the big play, right? Because working from home is making everybody vulnerable, including the companies. And we could dedicate hours just to this topic. And there's 4,000 different companies offering security solutions in the world. And so basically, you gotta pick your right stack. And if you're not quite sure what you're doing as an MSP, you're gonna want to outsource that or get some kind of an ecosystem built so you can kind of like build your own, team to kind of deliver the services. But security, just to kind of touch bases on it, every MSP should be revisiting their own security practice, right? Because right now they're an attack vector, right? So let's start there, right? How compliant are you, right? How vulnerable? What's your risk level? And once they figure that out, then they've got to extend, the same risk management for security to their customers. And this is serious business. This is not just work from home. This is just like work from life. This is like your whole business, depends on it. So you've got to get this right. We're not going to talk too much about the security aspects, but there's a few technologies that you definitely want to bake in, and it's not VPN. VPN is very, very difficult, as sucks up a lot of bandwidth, and maybe they'll get better, but there's these things they're old technologies, right? And today, you're looking at creating kind of a zero kind of like compliance issues. So everybody is managing what they can and can't do. They have different technologies so that connects you with the various data points or servers that you need to, right? There are ways for managing the data. So once it's secured here on your computer, there's a way to send it over to be secured, but also you got to scrub that data for viruses going into the main center. So I mean, there is just so many different levels and details. Most companies are definitely making this their number one topic. So MSPs, my best advice is like do a massive deep dive, like hit the bottom on this one, right? And bring your A game to your customers, whether it's your game or someone else's game, partnered with you, whatever. Bring your A game to your customers, because that is going to sort of solidify your position as the work from home, go-to, partners. Anybody want to just talk briefly on security before we jump to the next?
Well, what I would add on there is, because again, it's an opportunity to actually add a service. So if it's something which you can't do in-house, there are organizations you can partner to do it. But why not go back to your clients, as well as providing advice in the abstract sense on security, why not offer penetration testing service? Say, let us try and breach the network we put in place for you, and then we can give you a report on where we think your vulnerabilities are. Because as we know, the vulnerability tends not to be the actual staff, but it could be a vector because they've sent an email to the wife and their connection wasn't secured, but now they can get back in through the back door. So penetration testing is a nice additional service. And if you know that most people in your area aren't offering it, it may be the one thing which gives you that little bit of a USP, which is we don't just sell you, but on an annual basis, we will attack our own setup for you and give you a full report on what breaches we've identified and recommend solutions. So again, with a lot of these topics, let's as MSPs be proactive in our approach to it rather than reactive.
I think this is a perfect opportunity for MSPs to create their own IP. I'll tell you why. Obviously, Office 365, a tenant is not secure out of the box. There's all kinds of protocols that are left open, for legacy software. And if you could create an IP of, I created an Office 365 protocol, a security protocol with, 10 steps to secure an Office 365 tenant, and that's a package. And then I have a more enhanced one, which is about 20 steps, and it goes deeper and deeper. And that's a much more expensive package, but it's a win-win, because for one, once you have the steps in place, it becomes very easy for a technician just to pick up those steps, implement that at a fairly good margin, but also the client benefits because they're now safe. That's one thing. So you can create these things. You can also create, the biggest thing right now is phishing, right? Even the smartest people are getting sometimes tricked by phishing scams or other things. So that kind of education is a great way also to create your own IP. You can use a company that does these phishing simulations, if you will. But what about creating a 1 or 2 hour presentation about just basic security, how to see where the email's coming from, how to look where a link is going to without clicking on the link. Just those two things alone would solve a lot of questions. I know I have people, like friends of mine, that send me phishing links to go, is this legit? And I have to like point little red arrows, like, did you see this? It's coming from Russia, from the email address, and this is not the Microsoft logo. Oh, it drives me nuts.
insane.
But
And for those who know, you can actually go when you become a Channel Partner Alliance member. Even not, you can contact Randall, and he can hook you up with some of these tools, and you can actually buy some and resell them, and so on. So there's lots of additional opportunities there. So I encourage you to dig into this one, get it right, because that's your in. That's your big in. That's your stickiness, right? That's what you want to do. So security is definitely the big thing. This morning, I was chatting with a company that creates tools, actually kiosks and so on, that helps with back to work health monitoring. You go in, the machine is there, it checks your temperature, it checks if you are double vax, triple vax, quadruple vax, whatever they do, and then it gives you a sort of like, yes, you can go, no, you can't go type thing, almost like going through a kind of a ticketing system where the gate only opens if the light comes on green type thing, right? Airports are adding this now. There's a e-kiosk where you can go in there now. You can get scanned, and if everything is okay, you go right through instead of going through the whole process and have a human, monitor it. Gives up a lot of privacy issues, a lot of challenges in this area. But in general, things like, for example, these devices monitor where you are, how many people are in the space. So if you're only supposed to have a certain amount of people in the space, how do you know when you go over? A lot of people don't want to use face recognition because they don't want to be, for privacy issues. So this company now uses infrared, right, to help monitor how many people and how many bodies are in any given room at any given time, and then set off some alarms and stuff. These technologies also can extend into pretty much any industry you can imagine. So there's a lot of people that have built amazing technology around this back to work, remote work type gig, where it's probably going to be a hybrid. You go back to the work for a certain amount of time and go back to home for a certain amount of time. And when you're back to work, there's probably going to be some new rules, right? At least for the while. So these are new technologies that you could implement. At which point do you guys think that technologies we're implementing for the word of COVID, right, is going to become such a like, oh my God, not again, right? That we need to move past and just have people just be people as it was?
I think obviously after, let's say this gets to a point where it's manageable, I think we're always going to live with COVID in some form or another. Hopefully it'll be mild. But even as a business owner, as an MSP, we have to start thinking, how does my business function if half my techs are in quarantine? Is that a question that we've asked ourselves? And do we have a plan to deal with it? Because look at what's happening with the airline industry. They had to cancel so many flights because staff were getting sick. So this is an exercise that we can even do with our clients. Like, okay, Mr. Client, what if 50% of your workforce cannot work? They have to stay home. How are you going to deal with it? These are the technology solutions that might help you in those situations to keep your business running efficiently. That's not the question you asked, but that's just the point that was going through my head. I didn't want to miss it.
No, but I think you're another great point, right? You really got to be prepared for all these things that's going to happen. I think whatever's going to happen in the future is going to be, similar to what's happening now, right? The question is, how do we deal with it? So the main thing is there are these technologies that can help you manage back to work, and also, but not just to work, restaurants, concerts, different activities. They may put a limit. This month may be a limit of like 200 people in an event. Next month we can do 2,000, whatever. And how do you manage that? You got to throw bodies at it, right? So automating this may actually be something that you can bake into your customers' portfolio. So, especially if they need this to be going up and down, up and down, up and down, because you can't find the people to hire them overnight. If you have an event, that you need to monitor 10,000 people or whatever it is, right? You got to use some technology. So these are things that's available right now, I believe. So not something else to take a look at.
I think it's one about again about agility, isn't it? Really, I think that what we'll find from the pandemic is that, like you said, there's been a lot of trade-offs and control and security by people all around the globe, and we know that over the coming months we'll see a winding back of some of those things. But it's the nature whenever governments etc. put in legislation, it never all comes back off. So I think they'll make sure there's sufficient control mechanisms in place for if it's needed in the future. Hopefully not for another 50 years, but if it's 5 years' time, then we're ready to go again. So it will create, I think, some form of opportunity for technology. I guess the real question for them really is, in terms of some of the technology, are they too late? In the sense of, at the end of the pandemic, are all those businesses who suddenly set up sterilising airports with those UV robots, are they suddenly going to find their order books dry up when that's no longer required? So I think it's an interesting space to be in. So if I gave any advice, what I would do is I would look for the technology which was already in use pre-pandemic, which we're seeing mature through the pandemic, and that I think are the ones which will take. The prime example could be Zoom. Zoom was a bit player prior to the pandemic, and now for the non-tech business, I'd imagine it's the name they all know of. Most of them aren't going to be thinking, I'm going to use Teams. I'm going to use GoToWebinar. They're going to be using Zoom. So I think if you were recommending a piece of technology, then I would just do your little bit of due diligence on where they came from, where they potentially could go. Because I'm always aware that old saying in business, if you can see the bandwagon, you've already missed it.
So totally right. Another great points. I mean, I think you really got to kind of put yourself in the shoes of your customers and to kind of understand how their employees, their customers, and supply chain is sort of working with them. In a way, it's all under the umbrella of digital transformation, right? And all these technologies, you may not want to jump on the fads, right? Although maybe some fads will become trends, but take a peek closely at it, but only make sure you're recommending technologies where it makes sense. So, for example, if I was going to monitor people with vaccines, like thousands of people, anybody who's doing like concerts and theaters and stuff like that, that might be a place that they could invest because they have the bodies going through it, right? And that means much less staff to monitor those things. And another problem is like we don't want frontline staff to be, the bouncers, fighting various people who are vaccinated and all that stuff and unvaccinated, and be the defense front, if you will, for that. Yeah, maybe automation and technology could be a better way. Randall?
I was going back to Zoom just before we. I like your point though, but Zoom is phenomenal. I mean, my parents are in their 70s and they know how to use Zoom. I don't think of any other technology that took on such a big impact and so easily. People just get it. They understand it. Even the unmuting, the muting. Yes, we make fun of it, but they eventually get it. I've actually suggested to companies to make little Zoom, cocktail hour or whatever it is. If you don't drink cocktails, hire a local band. You can hire a local band for $200-300. That will help out the music industry, an industry I love, by the way, as you know.
Yes.
You can hire maybe even less. You can hire them to perform for half an hour just for your staff, somebody local. And I've contacted comedians. I had comedians that do clean comedy that were available to do a little 15-minute set. They were a little scared to do it because they don't know how it was going to work on Zoom. But I figured, hey, try it. You got nothing to lose. We'll even let people unmute themselves, make them known that as if they're in a club, like don't talk between the set. But if you want to laugh, go ahead and laugh.
That's a great idea.
There's so many things you can do with the technology that goes above and beyond just business aspects. Like this is a social experiment, doing a Zoom appreciation day or something or evening. And, some people just send a little Uber Eats coupons for their employees. And instead of having the big party at the end of the year, they do something similar to this. And you can include different parts of it. And, as an MSP, it's not that hard. Call me. I'll tell you a list of all the bands across Canada or the US that we can hire. I've interviewed a lot of them. So it's not that hard. Just do a little bit of research and you can bring these really off the wall solutions. And it's using technology, but you're also solving a need. And when you start solving these needs that your clients have, talk about loyalty. They're not going to go anywhere else.
Yeah, and you're building loyal. You're building also, not just loyalty, but culture within your company, which people talk a lot about the office culture, the business culture. But in reality, what is that?
Yeah.
Right? It's about how your people interact with each other, right? Culture could be, 10 people in your office like motorcycles, 14 likes tennis,
Here,
2 likes.
I'll even offer this. I bought 2 domains: virtual employee appreciation and virtualclientappreciation.com. They're about to expire. If anybody wants them, I'll transfer them before I let them expire. I just don't have the time to build this stuff. But hey, you could build a whole business, and some have, about just organizing virtual Zoom events for customers and clients. That's a whole business itself, using technology completely off, thinking outside the box, which is what we do here.
Yeah, I think it's that classic, and Randy, you hit the nail on the head there, really, which was what we've got to always do is don't think that when you create a new technology, we have to throw everything away which we did before. We can take a lot of the good stuff and say, how can we actually recreate or sometimes even improve this by bringing in it through digital technology? So a really great example, Randall. Thanks for sharing that, because I hadn't thought about that one. It's like, now I'm thinking, I could book.
There you go.
And even Dwayne in our chat group, he put on a couple events, virtual concerts for our clients that they were able to invite their customers, and he said it was great. So thanks, Dwayne Roebuck.
There you go. Jumping to these are great, creative, thinking out of the box things. And I just want, as the MSPs are listening to this, whether you're listening to it live or on demand afterwards, just think a little bit differently, right? Think about things that you may not have thought before, right? How do you help your customers to become better with you, but also how do maybe you help your customers become better with their employees or their customers? So all these things adds value and makes you stickier to the client. Let's jump to green technologies for a second. So, no doubt we're all living in some kind of a climate war zone, no matter where you are. There's lots of problems that you see every day you pop in. And the question then becomes, well, what do we do? Right? So, green technologies, there's many green technologies for work from home, right? There are things that you need to make sure that the equipment you're selling to them are sort of like, not pulling too much juice or electricity, right? You got bandwidth issues. There's many devices that pulls less electricity. There's lots of things that you want to ensure that you're not just piling on to the AC, right, of your building, of your home. You want to have efficient equipment, monitors, hard drives, lighting. We're all getting more lighting, right? Cameras, docking stations. All these things are pulling more juice, right? So you also got to look to see what your electric bill is going to be about, right? And how do you mitigate that, right? And around that whole area of power management, you also want to be talking things like UPSs and stuff, because if you've got these people working from home and they don't have their devices properly protected with a UPS, and you get the brownouts and the blackouts and all that stuff that happens, then there you go. You got to keep replacing equipment again and again and again. So you also got to think about insurance as well, right? Because, if you've got these equipment everywhere, then your insurance policy might be a little bit different. But to the green aspect, how does MSPs green up their customers, especially the ones that's working from anywhere?
I think the thing where I'd start, because it's, again, let's look for the easy wins, because easy wins demonstrate success is easy to build lots of layers on top of that. So what I would talk about is we're linking it back to the entire home worker, is actually maybe putting a simple tool which just measures actually the amount of time not spent commuting. Because corporate social responsibility, there's a huge carbon saving up front by getting all those cars and all those vehicles off the road. For a number of years,
right,
companies would be very proud to herald like the share a car to work type of programs.
Yes.
So now we've got those off. So let's take that as a benchmark. We say, okay, we get our staff off the road. That's X amount of miles saved, X amount of tons of carbon saved per year, so that we can all celebrate that baseline success. And then we can start looking at some of the other, like the smart technology, looking if they're on greener levels of equipment, etc. But I think don't miss the obvious ones. I remember many years ago, I worked with a consultant who was ex-chief executive of an American petroleum company. And he decided that petrol was now bad after he'd semi-retired. in that he was going around doing environmental audits, and he was basically doing them for 3. He was saying, I'll do a 3 audit, I'll demonstrate for you how much you will save, and if you save that money, you pay me a percentage. And he was getting no work. And so you're getting no work because no one yet sees the value in it. So we need to make sure that if we are going to do, from a commercial point of view, your company, if you're going to be promoting for green tech, your customers have to be convinced that there's actually a genuine pound for pound return for that investment. Businesses, unless they've got a very idealistic leader, unlikely to make changes just because they're greener. They want to see the improvement in the bottom line or the efficiency somewhere as well.
I'm sure there's a way, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head to even gamify this, like how to reduce your carbon footprint. So the days that you don't go into work, you put in your mileage, and it gives you an idea of how much carbon footprint you've saved by not doing that. That would be a cool thing to invent if that's not there already. But also, I mean, as MSPs, we've done the transition. I'm saying we as in all of us, I think, if you haven't done this, but doing more remote work than on site. But there's always those customers that want people on site. They just kind of that old school mentality. And I just thought this is a great way to kind of convince them that a greener way is to try remote first. And then if it's really necessary, go on site. That's a way. We know that there's with traffic, especially with the in our neck of the woods anyway, Montreal, Toronto, there's tons of snow right now. It's extremely cold. So commutes are much longer. Sometimes you can use the green. I would hate to say it, but it's as an excuse not to do on-site support. But
it's not even an excuse. It's a valid reason, right? We all got to chip in to save the environment. Period. And the reality is every little bit helps, right? So I think getting rid of the commute is a big win, right? Making sure the equipment you put in your homes is a big win if it's actually greener, right? There are different monitors, right? Some pull a lot more juice than others, and so on. So you do have to look at the greenness of it, right? And of course you need to do that because if you having work from home employees, and whatever you're putting in there is actually going to cost them more on their monthly electric bill, right? Who's going to pay for that, right? So you got to look for that as well. So there's a lot of little things that working from anywhere, everywhere is going to bring to the surface over time. We're just sort of shaking the tree a little bit here, rattling the cage to give you some heads up as you move forward. Virtual collaboration is another thing I wanted to talk about. So collaborative tools, teams, and so on. I mean, that's sort of the obvious, right? Zoom. You definitely got to have your platforms you want, but not all platforms are created equally, right? And not all platforms work for everybody in the way it's supposed to be. So you got to know when to recommend Zoom, when to recommend Teams, when to recommend others. There's several others out there that's actually, developing platforms to compete with others, right? I don't know what we could say, but there's just a truckload of technologies for collaboration, right?
I have to admit that when I first started working with SharePoint, I had no clue. I'm always learning. I'm not the smartest guy in the room oftentimes, to be quite honest. But, when I saw how you can actually have 3 or 4 different persons working on the same Excel sheet, it blew my mind. And then you actually see where they are and what they're doing. And it completely changed the way that some clients are working. It allows them to have more collaborative effort, and it's not an expensive solution. It's kind of built into the Office 365 platform. You pay $30 more than an Exchange Online, and you get this solution. It's a no-brainer.
Awesome way to do it.
A lot of people
and to give others some equal sharing, you could do with Google Docs. You could do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
You can go on there and you can have multiple people
adjust. Has that ability to work multiple people. And it's just it's some of our responsibility is to educate our clients into what's possible. And some still do. I'll send you the Excel sheet, work on it, and send me back the changes. Whereas, why can't you do it live and actually be on a phone call or a Teams meeting and actually see what they're doing and then guide them and do the whole thing, close the project, move on to something else?
I think for me, the key thing there, the word I picked up on there is educate. It's a prime example. If you're not really doing to build some form of social media presence, what you do is you talk about the different tools. Because like you said, one tool is not the right fit. But if you're a respected MSP within your own community, you don't need to have 10,000 people following on social media. It could be 100 if they're all your customers. And if they're looking at it and going, what I want is a collaboration tool, and it's like, oh, we've got a little video series here where different engineers just talk about what the pros and cons of each platform are. And there's like, and then it just ends with maybe a little recommend for the type of businesses that you've worked with who have used this really well. And it's like, oh my God, start that conversation. I'd also say these days, which we've done in the past, is that we've all got customers who really love us. They're our evangelists, aren't they? They support us more than just like the run-of-the-mill customer would. Well, if you've got a customer you've helped on that journey, case study it. Or even better, if possible, if they're willing to do it, let them speak to new prospective customers. Say, hey, we've got a great solution for you. We implement it with business Y. Why don't you have a chat with them? In the international shipping area, which as you know is an area I work in, we actually flew a registrar from one government to another country to spend a team with the people who've been using the software solution for the previous 18 months before we made a buying decision. So we can be really smart. So sometimes we do it all via digital, but sometimes it's like it's almost like we add layers of technology, and it's almost like shiny new syndrome. We run after the new bit, but the bits beneath it are still good.
Yes.
So let's make them.
You definitely got to leverage with the virtual technology collaboration, but also in person. Well, it's never going to go away, and if it does, I don't want to be part of the world. But moving to the next step, we've got about 10 minutes left here, 9 minutes. I want to talk a bit about Metaverse. You know, we're hearing the word more. It's been around forever, for a long time. We're hearing the word more. Some companies actually have created virtual verses, you know, where you can go as this Metaverse, you can collaborate with your employees. It's taking virtual collaboration beyond the documents, 2D things, to an actual 3D where you're interacting with each other's avatar or something like that. You know, I don't know if it's here now, but of course you can actually deploy these things here now because the technology exists. But what's your take on how MSPs should look at the Metaverse technologies and why they should maybe jump into this sooner rather than later, if at all?
I think it's going to be a very rapid growth area. It's also going to be very quickly evolving. So I definitely say you want to be involved with it, but maybe pick the entry point of what you want to offer. So if we take Channel Partnership Alliance now within the CPA, if we want to, we can now deliver coaching in the Metaverse. We've got Oculus Rift headsets. We can set up virtual boardrooms, and we work one-on-one with clients and throw screens up on the wall and draw three-dimensional pretty pictures. Fantastic. The other extreme, I've got a client in the UK, and they run a coffee shop, and they've just opened their first virtual coffee shop. So he employs people now 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to wear a virtual headset. People come in, order their virtual coffees, and then collect them later. So it's already happening. So if you sit in retail, and we all know what, you know, in many ways the retail business struggles so much these days, it's only going to cascade up. I guess like all these things, it's like, which technology to jump on board with, because you know we're always all worried about the same thing, which is we jump on the Betamax when VHS wins, or we go HD DVD when Blu-ray wins. So it's like there's an element of risk there, isn't there?
Risk, but you got to jump into it, right? Randall, what's your take on it?
Well, there's the leading edge and the bleeding edge, right? And unfortunately for us, I think a lot of the tech-minded people, the geeks, we like the bleeding edge. We like to just, sometimes it hurts, but sometimes it can be extremely valuable to see what's coming. And I don't know. I love all this stuff. I was intrigued about the virtual boardroom that Neil talked about last week. So I'm actually looking at getting an Oculus just to have fun with that one.
It's a fun tool, you know, especially when you play the sword thing. You know, it's really, anyway. I move on. You know, one of the things with this virtual reality as we move into is that without a doubt it's going to blow up, right? And I think the reason, what I would suggest to MSPs and channel is get involved at the ground floor, because you can grow with it, right? You carve out your position at the ground floor. It's like, you know, remember when Domino's Pizza had the drones deliver pizza, and it was all over the news, they're delivering pizza. Well, you know, when was the last time you got a pizza delivered by a drone, right? I never got one, right? The reality is that even though these technologies may not come to, you know, fruition like it's happening, right? It just puts you in a technology leading edge bucket, right? And that means your customers look upon you as, oh my goodness, my MSP is got the tools, they got the toys, they got the good stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I wanna know what they're doing because they're always bleeding out there, right? And some of these things may not fit, but some might, right? And I think virtual
So
reality is going to be one of those things that everybody's going to
what
probably be
what I
using.
would say as well is if you look at your customer base, and I was looking at my customer base, and I thought I've got a significant proportion of my user base who are in design, engineering, or manufacture. You've definitely got to be there because what you are seeing obviously is not just virtual reality but augmented reality. So I can go in and I can build something in augmented reality, send it to my 3D printer. So I print out the prototype before I then rapid test it into manufacturing. It's so much cheaper to do than the old fashioned way of working. That is an area where we already see something which was a vague idea a few years ago become the norm. So I think there's that kind of space we need to watch very carefully. So again, it's a combination. Yeah, I think we've got to always be innovating, looking for the new stuff, but also look at our customer base. If you've got people who are in a particular sector, is there something within that space which is going to be particularly exciting to them? Because that again is just another may just help give you a little bit of steerage and slightly de-risk that idea a little bit more.
I think also it's an opportunity for MSPs to introduce a new pricing structure to their price list. I mean, tech support is something that almost any other company can do. There's a million tech support companies in any given area, but is there a 3D printer specialist? Well, that might be worth twice the hourly rate, or even three times the hourly rate. So it's an opportunity for MSPs to bring in these new value points of a higher rate for a very specified niche product or specialty, which could take off, or maybe it won't. But there's not much to lose except a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of money and investment to looking into the
Yeah.
technology. But if it works, you can get yourself now a new SKU, a new service offering at a much higher rate because you're specialized and you're an expert.
Embrace the change in the new technologies. To summarize a few things here, I mean,
It's a robot.
yeah, we'll have an army of robots working for us. So, summarizing these things, like you got to be rethinking your workplace, right? That's the first thing. And just get a blank piece of paper and just rethink it from beginning to end. You might be surprised what you find there. Talent and skills is going to be adjusting because different talents and skills you need. Sometimes you need them in-house. Sometimes you need them, anywhere. You can hire development skills anywhere on the planet today. So think about the technology and the talent and skills you need and marry those up. And then you've got this digital enablement. You've got to make sure you got the technologies in there to kind of enable people to do their work, digitally, right? Don't forget you're managing now a hybrid world, right? You've got the in-person people, the virtual world, and it's not one or the other. So if you don't have the skills to manage these things, you get them or find people who has them. Like you just can't apply in-person management skills to remote management skills. I'm not quite sure it's going to translate. It's not a straight line translation. You also need to be redefining culture. You got to take your culture. I don't know what that culture is, but it's a redefining of it, right? Is it people having fun, partying, whatever that is? I don't know what that culture is, but redefine it because it's going to be different with a new hybrid workforce, right? So put some energy into helping your clients redefine that, read up on it a little bit, and then always remember, no matter what, it's a human-centric work design. It's a redesign for human-centric, right? It's no longer a machine thing. It's about the machines enable the humans to do things. But for the first time, the humans seem to be back in the driver's seats. I will not work for you if I don't get flex time. I will not do this if you don't do that. And I'm not saying it's about any age group of people out there. I just think humans woke up during the pandemic and says, whoa, is this all there is? Is work who I am or work what I do? Is it
Mm.
work where I'm, where I go? Is it where, where I am, And I think these questions, philosophical and stuff, we're not philosophical. We're not that type of people here. So I'm not quite sure where it all goes, but you need to be thinking about that stuff, right? I'll let you guys close it out, but I got a couple of stats I wanted to share from Gardner. 75% of the hybrid remote knowledge workers say that their expectations of working flexibly have increased, right? 4 out of 10 employees are at risk of leaving you if you insist they return to an in-person workplace. PwC did a review of 10,000 folks around the world, and 66% of them see the future of work as a world of possibilities and believe it will be hugely successful, right? And 53% think that technology breakthroughs will transform the way people work within the next 5 years. I know that most CEOs say that what their business is today is definitely going to be what it's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be completely different. So this is a world, work from home, work from anywhere is just part of the gig, right? But it's part of a bigger thing that's happening in the world. So monitor that, get into position as an MSP, make sure you understand that at a DNA level so you can go back to your clients and advise them the right ways to kind of, get them up to scale, up to speed, but also you can probably make a very, good revenue stream out of it. I'll let each person give a wrap up. I'll go with you first, Neil. Let's end this.
I would say embrace the change. Don't actually think that you employ people because you trust them. So when you let them work from home, don't make your default position then become, now I'm worried that I don't trust them. If you don't trust them, don't employ them in the first place.
Embrace the change. Randall?
I think today we redefine MSP. I think MSP, after our discussion today, is make successful people, MSP. I think that's really our new goal, is to really work on the people and not just technology. So make successful people. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it for us for this edition. Again, episode 8. Next week we'll have episode 9. We're going to start to bring in some coaches here so we can grill them as well. But hey, have a safe one, everybody. Great content again today. If you're an MSP looking at this in a live stream or on demand, hope it helps you. All this information is behind the firewall called Channel Partner Alliance, and we encourage you to become members. It's just $99 a month. And basically, you're going to have not just these sessions, but a whole ton of content and help that check episodes 1 through 7, and you'll get the gist of what we mean. ChannelPartnerAlliance.com. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week, Tuesday.
Barbecue coaches. I love it.